Welcome to the Realize Today podcast. Today, I got my good friend Alexander Hill with me. Welcome, Alexander. How you doing today?
Awesome. Thanks for having me, Tommy.
Of course, man. Of course. So, I'll start with community. Me and Alexander have overlapping community in Austin. We got to know each other in the last year or so, maybe like 8 months. It's been a pleasure getting to know you, man, and learning a little bit about your journey and what brought you here. So excited to have you on, man. And I'll just start with that. Being in Austin, so many different things to do and awesome communities around. What has been a big part of your journey in meeting people and being a part of communities? And what has that been like for you in Austin?
Great question. So, my journey has been a lot about giving and receiving, and I identify as a men's coach. So, so I would say, as a men's coach, as a leader, as a speaker, as somebody who really puts themselves out there in service to others, I've learned a lot in the past couple of years, especially since the pandemic and the past 3 years in particular, about how much I can give and then how much I'm supported. So I think a lot of us have learned these lessons over the past couple years. A lot of us have really big hearts and we want to help and we want to serve and we want to open up healing centers or retreat centers or, open our homes to healing work and all of these types of things. And my wife and I, have been together for about 6 years now, and we definitely did a lot of that. And I think after doing a lot of that, we've learned a lot of lessons, of what that is about and what it means to really support people and to coach people and to be there for others in community and what's sustainable and what's not.
Awesome. And so, before you came over here, and what were you doing before that? In learning these lessons and being in community, I'd love for you to express a little bit more of what you do. You say men's coaching, and I know your wife does work in those realms. And, if you had to get a little more specific, what exactly does Alexander do?
Sure. Well, the hero's journey has been a part of my life and every man's life. It's something that we all go on together. So it's really understanding purpose as a man and guiding men into purpose and their highest gifts and their highest calling and defeating the lesser self, the lower self. That's basically trying to sabotage us with addictions and all of these tendencies that want to bring us down. So I really believe it's a battle, and anybody who says it's not a battle, might not know a man's journey. I think there's men that suffer more specifically with addiction and others that might not have as much trouble. But I think we're all on that journey of believing in ourselves and loving in ourselves and trusting in ourselves and Creator and that co-creation each and every day. So what I do is, remind people of the divinity within them and lead by example and really just sharing my journey openly, vulnerably, of like the good, bad, and the ugly. And my life hasn't been easy in a lot of ways, from, high school and, getting diagnosed bipolar to a near-death experience to, a lot of ups and downs in my life, success, and then, going broke and then success. It's like just a lot of roller coasters of lessons and hardship and also just teachings and understanding. And I started a group called Man Tribe about 5 years ago in Venice with some friends and partners. And we, the whole idea behind that was like to get back to the way that we are supposed to be as human beings and specifically as men. So the whole tribal culture and the whole tribal way of life is fascinating to me because I grew up without a tribe. I grew up without a culture, essentially. Not that my ancestors and grandparents didn't have cultural ties, but a lot of it was just lost. and it wasn't taught to me growing up. And I think most of us can share, in that experience. At the same time, a lot of people I grew up with, like I was one of the few white kids in my high school. I grew up in the Bronx, and a lot of the immigrant families and kids I went to high school with did have cultures. They were Dominican, Jamaican, Puerto Rican, or from parts of Africa, and they had cultural ties. Their parents had just came to the U.S., so they practiced the ways of their culture. They ate the food of their culture, right? And as an American, I was eating like pizza and mac and cheese, like So I think just understanding self-identity and understanding where you're from and what that means, it's really, really important. So for people like myself, I'm not going to say us because I don't know your journey fully, but for people like myself, I really had to, become Sherlock Holmes of my own self-identity and understand my ancestry and understand really what feels good and what resonates with me. And that's what drew me to the Red Rope. That's what drew me to learning, tribal songs and learning from other cultures in order to better understand my own identity and my own ancestry. So yes, definitely like borrowing from other cultures, because that's the best idea I could come up with. And I know a lot of us in the communities, whether it's vision questers or people on the Sundance path, they are like borrowing from other cultures. This isn't their culture. They weren't raised in that way. So I don't see anything wrong with that as long as there's respect and reverence. And also at the same time, it's such a gratitude that we have to have. The fact that, the indigenous people are opening their hearts to us and sharing their ways with us when, they've been oppressed by people who look like us, right? And our ancestors. So it's such a beautiful thing, and it's also a necessary thing, because they feel like they need to do that. Because if they didn't, on some level, we might not have a planet anymore if people weren't waking up. They have to. A lot of indigenous communities and tribes have opened up their secrets and opened up their ceremonies and opened up their ways in order to save the planet. So it really is, it's not about any individual. It's really about the collective at this point and what needs to get done for the bigger picture. So yeah, there's a lot of topics there.
Yeah. I mean, I agree with so much of what you said. First, from being on that path of putting everything out there. It's the way that I've decided to operate my life, and it's the only way I want to operate my life. It helps me stay in better truth, and all the way up to men's work. I've done very much men's work. It's been such a huge part of my life, and it's like I was just craving more and more and more, and now toward being in these newer communities. I agree so much with the responsibility that we have to honor these sacred traditions and realize how blessed we are to be learning some of these things. Mm-hmm. And it's like there's this intersection toward where something new, it seems like, that hasn't happened before, of these ancient traditions and entrepreneurship. And it could totally there's room for things to get a little bit messy, and it's important for us to really listen to the elders, the way that these traditions have been passed down, so we could continue to learn them in the way that they were created, and pass them down in that way. Mm-hmm. And
yeah, when it comes to entrepreneurship, you bring up a good point. I see it as very simple, and really, to be a conscious entrepreneur, you need to be evolving yourself, and needing less and less materially as you go along,
Mm.
especially on this path of service. Once you realize that the most valuable thing that you're going to get on this path is an experience, it changes everything. It's not a car, it's not a house. It's, you know, we're going to get far more heart opening and ancestral healing and wisdom, and these things are truly priceless. So once you realize that that's what's really valuable, and those are the real gems along the way, you'll change your perspective, and then you become an entrepreneur for your family, for your community, for the greater community, for, assisting the indigenous, and learning how to do that, because it's not as easy as people might think, right? You don't just show up to a reservation or show up to a tribe and just give them money. You have to develop a relationship, and it's a reciprocity. This path is about reciprocity, because it's a two-way street, right? You're gonna get wisdom and teachings from people that might not have as much materially, and then you're gonna donate, or you're going to assist them with a fundraiser, or take a retreat down to a village in Mexico, like my wife and I did. And yeah, I think it's not this old paradigm of you're going to heal yourself until you're healed and then you're going to lead and serve. It doesn't work like that. The way that it's been for me is you're going to continue on your path of healing. You're going to continue on your path of service, and you're going to evolve with the people that are on the path with you, and you're going to evolve with those reciprocal relationships of your elders and your spiritual guides and mentors, and those people that are assisting you. So it really is, it's a co-creation. It's a power with, it's not a power over, or nobody's like teaching us in this like old paradigm type of way, right? So there's really no expectations. It's kind of like this experiment where we're all showing up with our best intentions, and then we go on that journey together, and we see, what needs to get done, and then that's where community becomes so important.
Yeah, yeah, I feel you on that, man. And yeah, as you talk about sacred reciprocity, that's been something for me that seems to move the needle the most, but I've struggled with it. It's like I've found the conditioning that I've had, being raised in American culture, and the laws of giving and receiving, and even as I started down the spiritual path, going whatever that means, going down that path, and for years, just not really understanding the concept of sacred reciprocity. And then I met some people who really embodied those qualities, and I was mind blown by them, because they they seemed to have endless energy. They ran on the spirit of like giving their energy, being generous all the time, and it seemed to be this flow of energy that just kind of like fills them up all the time. And I was fascinated by it. And so this was just in the last year. So that's kind of started my journey with learning about sacred reciprocity. And I still struggle with it. But I find that when I am in that flow, and I do get in that flow, it moves the needle as much as anything else in terms of my fulfillment, my connection with spirit, and how I'm feeling. And so it's one of my main focuses, and I seem to teeter back and forth. It's like I'll be in this state of just giving, my energy and being selfless, and then conditioning will come back, and I'll get a little like scarcity mindset, and get a little tight for a week, and then I'll be like, this is not the way I want to be.
So, if I'm hearing you correctly, the conditioning is the struggle.
Um, I would say that there are still parts of my old conditioning that kind of can take the ship sometimes. And maybe I wouldn't even, conditioning is not the right word. It's more broad than that. The word I would probably use is just fear. You know, fear of there's not enough for everyone.
Lack, scarcity, limitation.
Yeah.
Thinking that if I give too much, there's not going to be enough for me.
Yeah.
Sure.
It's like an automatic kind of like, my mind kind of just goes there, and then I find myself there, and then I'm like, oh, here I am again. You know, have you struggled with that, you know, in your process as growing up a man in America and learning these ways? What was your experience like in integrating them?
Yeah, well, I think we're sort of venturing out of a lot of this wasn't necessarily in the indigenous community. This is just outside in the everyday life.
Yeah, and you know, in many different cultures, you know,
so to speak, because it's almost like when you're on the spiritual path, I've had to always ask myself, you know, what can I integrate? And you know, because American culture or American society is like this beast. It's like this. It's this really macro, like mainstream, right? So there's the mainstream narrative, which isn't the narrative of my heart, and it's not the narrative that I feel inside. It doesn't. The mainstream narrative very rarely, if ever, like aligns with what I feel as a human.
Yeah.
Pretty much. I think that's the whole point. It's not supposed to, so we can evolve, right? It's like direct contradiction to what I'm feeling inside, and what I feel is good for humanity is the mainstream narrative, the opposite. So essentially, my journey, to answer your question, my journey has been a lot of that. It's because in my 20s, you know, I basically determined after my experiences in high school, being misdiagnosed bipolar, and just having a lot of challenges with fitting in. Never felt like I fit in high school, college, even my first career in my 20s in commercial real estate in Manhattan. I never had a real place that made sense to me. So I was always sort of seeking and struggling and trying to fit into something, and then I realized I'm never going to fit into anything other than myself. So ultimately, this idea of exchange and this idea of reciprocity and being an open-hearted, giving person in a world that it feels like is taking from you, in a world that feels like it's not receptive to an open-hearted person. It's going to take advantage of an open-hearted person. I think it's all about your perspective, because I'm a lot of people might not share this view with me, and I know a lot of people certainly don't, but I believe humans are good, like for sure. I've traveled enough. I've been all over the world. Humans are inherently good. Sure, there's some thieves and there's some people that are healing, and you know, lots of compassion to different sectors of society where there's atrocious things happening. But I really believe in humanity. I think a lot of the systems and wars and ways of the past have traumatized us, have separated us, have created all of these problems that get passed down. So we definitely have immense problems and societal and family breakdown that really needs eldership. It needs eldership, and it needs the sacred ways to understand and to begin the healing process for a lot of these things that are just completely broken in our society. So yeah, for me, it was like I went into real estate and I went into making money for myself, because my view, before I had my near-death experience, before I really found God and connected to my spiritual path at 27. So from like 22 to 27, it was like those 5 years of making as much money as I could and hustling pretty hard, because I believed the world was against me, and I believed that the world was a fucked up place, and that I had to just get my money so I could be good and live in my own little world, you know, go to my restaurants, go on dates, travel, and I didn't really feel connected to the greater world or even a community for that matter. So I was very much like just getting for myself. And that was a pretty miserable existence. Sure, I was making money, but I felt very alone. And I just felt very disconnected from the type of existence and experience I have now here in Austin as part of communities with you, for example. It's like there's no comparison. Like what I was experiencing back then in my 20s and how disconnected and alone and sad I was, not having a purpose, not having a true connection to the work that I was doing or the people that I was doing it with. And that near death experience that I had really put me into another realm. And once I had gone to that realm of oneness and interconnectedness, I tried to go back to real estate and connect, and it just wasn't happening.
Yeah.
It wasn't happening. And a lot of my drinking buddies and a lot of the people that I knew in New York, I could no longer really share with them the fullness of who I am or who I was at that point. So that's when the real spiritual work and the real journey began, because you have to take a hard look at yourself and a hard look at your social circle and your friends, and you say, who am I? Are these people really my friends, or are they just drinking buddies or chasing women buddies? Or do they only like me if I go talk to the girl and get the whole group of girls to come over and hang out with us? Do they only like me if I take shots with them? What's really going on here? You know, what do these people really want from me? So there was a lot of those dynamics at play, and a lot of it was just fake.
Yeah, I feel you on that. It's like, I had to question so much. I left my hometown, and some relationships stayed for a little while, but then it's like when we're not together doing what we used to do, either drinking or getting high or something, and it's like, is there anything of substance that we really connect on? And a lot of those relationships ended up ending.
Yeah, it's like if your main activity together is checking out, then what do you really have in common that you check out together? It's kind of like, oh, we play video games together, or we gamble together, or we, get fucked up together.
Yeah.
Whatever that is, it's like, are we really even together? Are we really even here? No. It's like two people that aren't present, and you're just sort of like connecting on those shadow aspects and agreeing. It's almost like a friendship in a way. You're agreeing like life is fucked up and tough, so we're gonna check out together. This is how we're
very
gonna
well
deal with
said.
it.
I relate so much. That's funny, man. And you touched once or twice on your near-death experience, and I don't want to just blow by that. I'd love, and this is one of my favorite things to talk about is, everyone seems to have an interesting story about, like, what was the thing, or, oftentimes it's pain that led to that change of life, or, wanting to open the heart and go down that path.
Yeah, well, I told you a little bit about the life that I lived in my 20s. So just picture like high pressure sales environment. Was closing, bigger commercial transactions, leasing buildings and stores in New York City and Manhattan mostly. And it was just a very high pressure, like wealthy, greedy type of world. Competitive, highly competitive. So it really was all about the money, and that was, if you were making money, you were respected, and if you weren't, you were pretty much out of the business. There was no in between. So the people that stayed in the business, they had to keep closing deals. So it was basically like you did whatever you could to stay in the business and to close deals. And there was a culture. There was a culture of nightlife and partying, and I wouldn't necessarily associate it directly with the industry that I was in, but that's what was available. That's the legal alcohol and tobacco, and then the illegal, right, underworld of all the recreational drugs that were a part of like that experience, but definitely going out and showing off and spending money was part of my programming and was considered cool and a status symbol in New York. So I thought that was cool. And then other people thought that was cool. And we were just all living a lie, basically. Because, something happened in New York, I think it was in the 90s, with Bungalow 8, this club, and the whole hip hop uprising with, Puff Daddy and all, when hip hop became really popular in New York City, there became bottle service. And when bottle service started, it went from like the 80s and before to like kind of this open format, open club, everybody dancing, partying, kind of like we have here in Austin. We don't really have bottle service in Austin too much. At least I haven't seen it here. But this separation of like, okay, these are the VIP rich people and they're going to be partying over here. And this is like everybody else who just like, doesn't have money or just paid regular admission. But a lot of times, like I would be in the VIP section and I would be like opening up the gate to party with the people, that were not. And I just like, what? This doesn't make any sense. This feels so weird that there's like a red rope here and I don't like it. I never liked it. But like the drinks were like flowing abundantly on that side. So it just throws you off. And then it's just, but it feels like that. It's like that in society too, right? You have a smaller percentage of the people with a lot of the money that are hoarding the money and they're not sharing it with everybody. But like I was struggling so much in those environments because I have such a big heart and I wanted to share and be part of the people. Like I come from a blue collar, hardworking family. So, I mean, I to some degree in my 20s, I had a lot of success. I made it, right? To a lot of people, they consider, hey, you made it. But inside, I was just like, something doesn't feel right.
Yeah.
Something really doesn't feel right. And so the near-death experience was the buildup of all of that stress and all of those feelings of this doesn't feel right. My expression isn't coming out fully. Something is off inside of me, but I don't know what it is. The near-death experience was basically my heart stopping at Equinox at a workout with my personal trainer one day. And it was this huge wake-up call of my body just saying, you can't keep doing this to me. You can't keep treating me like shit. You can't keep neglecting me and destroying me. You need to really discover who you are. You need to really connect with your spiritual self. So that was it. That was the day, 27 years old. Heart stopped. Spirit came out of my body. If you've seen the movie Doctor Strange, there's a scene where that happens to him. It was kind of just like that. Wow. So there's this spiritual energy, right? What do you call it? My energy body was basically looking down. My etheric energy body was looking down at my physical body.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
For how long was that? Was time just not really able
They told me it was about 2 minutes.
2 minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
2 minutes, and then they were about to defibrillate me with the defibrillator, and then I woke up before they did that.
And now, I'd love to talk about like maybe the immediate afterwards, maybe not immediate, but the week afterwards and the month afterwards. And that must have been such a sharp shift in your life. Did the wake up call happen immediately? Did it take you a while to grasp it?
It was just confusion. I mean, at that point, like 27 years of living a certain way, the maybe not 27 years, but basically when I was a child, I was pure and I was very connected to spirit, and then life happens and programming sets in, and then you're at school. I went to public school, so it's not long before it's like, what are you going to be when you grow up? Well, I'm going to be me. But it doesn't work like that in school. They're like, you have to be a firefighter, or you have to be a lawyer or a doctor or whatever. So when that conditioning, so let's just say it was like 20 years of conditioning and then this experience that's just not really understandable in the context of who I created myself to be.
Mm-hmm.
So just like absolute fear, uncertainty, just complete unknown. And then on top of that, I didn't have anybody in my social network or in my community to speak to or to connect with about this experience because they thought I was just crazy or they couldn't relate.
Mm-hmm.
They had no way of relating. So I felt very alone. And then that's when I'd say my hero's journey really began, because before that I was atheist. I didn't really believe in God. I had so much confusion about God, and I kind of was like one of those people who says, well, if God exists, why is the world so fucked up? And now I'm one of those people that is like, God definitely exists and the world is not fucked up. The world is amazing and beautiful, and we have a lot of problems to solve and a lot of work to do. But ultimately, humanity is good. The earth provides us with massive abundance and so much amazing opportunity and love. There's just infinite love in this universe. And it's a journey to get as many people on board with that as possible so we can really exist on this planet. I don't like to say heal the planet, because we're not the ones that are going to heal the planet. We're going to heal ourselves, and we're going to heal each ourselves pretty much. That's our only responsibility at this point. And a lot of what we've been talking about is with retreat centers and healing centers, communities, these types of things. I've come back to like my main responsibility is taking care of me, taking care of my health, and showing up each and every day as a husband and a father and a member of my community.
Yeah.
That's pretty much it. Because if I'm doing that, everything's going according to the plan.
Yeah.
But if I get in my head and I'm like, oh, I have this ego and I think I'm supposed to be doing X, Y, Z and running this company, and a lot of that is just not truly authentic, I think. And you can get caught up in who you think you're supposed to be, and it's just not who you really are.
Yeah. Yeah. And totally agree with that. And it's almost like, yeah, I see the planet's going to heal us. You know, what we have to do is let go a little bit more and more.
Yeah.
And, you know, and the planet, you know, even if humans disappeared, Earth is just going to regenerate itself. It's like we just need to stop doing the damage and allow it to be what it is.
It's a co-creation. It's like you've been in ceremony, especially with medicines like ayahuasca. It's like when you just let go and feel the medicine and breathe, you realize that everything's happening for you.
Mm-hmm.
and all of a sudden, like, time stops, or like things just get a lot easier when you stop trying.
Yeah.
And when you just shut off your mind a little bit and just like, hey, we are nature, and nature's got our back, and we got nature's back. As much as if we can really focus on that relationship of like, okay, I need to move energy, I'm going to go to the river and do a cold plunge, or I'm going to go sit out on the earth and ground or do some yoga. That's self-awareness. It's really like a co-creation of that self-awareness with nature, and realizing like when we get back to nature and we understand ourselves and what we need, that we're going to be able to just be.
Yeah. Yeah. And, you know, it's so challenging, and I feel like especially for men and the personality of men to like let go of everything, you know, I see a lot of pressure being placed on men, you know, always and nowadays. And, you know, speaking of a lot of the things that you said, it reminds me of, you know, in a little bit of your journey, we get to decide what game we want to play. And it seems like there are these influences and almost unwritten agreements that we have of like, oh, we're all going to play this money game. Oh, or we're all going to play this popularity game, or we're all going to play this other game. And I feel like a huge part of the journey for man that isn't often talked about when we're children is like, figure out who you are, and you get to decide what game you want to play in this life. And the only way you could win is if you're playing your own game, you know, and by learning who you are internally. Um,
What does winning mean to you?
fulfillment, you know, like peace in your own heart. Um, that's what I mean by winning. I'm sure we could slice it in many different ways, but I believe to some extent that's what we're all seeking.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so, you know, a big part of that for me was men's work. You know, I'd love to go a little bit into that, and you know, so you mentioned that you had some time where you didn't have community as you're going through that period, and then years later, you decided to start Man Tribe. And I'm curious about your journey of um, opening up and being there, finding community with a group of men, and what was that experience like for you?
Yeah. Well, so basically how it went for me was 27 to 29. So after the near death experience, I discovered ayahuasca, and I discovered a place in New York that I could go to that became a community of mine. So I began to heal, began to open my heart, began to ask questions on the plant medicine and do the integration work. And integration is a whole nother topic for a whole nother podcast. But the level, if I can emphasize one thing on this podcast, is I'm still integrating from 10 years ago, from a ceremony that I did 10 years ago. So it's like the level of integration that's necessary. Like, integration really is the path. Integration, you could just say there's no psychedelic experience, there's only integration. Because the psychedelic experience doesn't matter unless there's integration. So unless you bring something back and actually make a change in your life and don't go back into the same patterns, what did you do? You just got high. Mm-hmm. And you might have experienced a lot of beauty and danced and or had a spiritual experience, but if you go back to the same life and you keep the same job and you don't change a thing, you just had a recreational experience. Mm-hmm. So really, to have a spiritual experience, it means you got to do the work, and sometimes doing the work sucks, and it's just absolute hell, and you got to face those parts of yourself, and you got to do hard shit, and you got to keep at it. And that's why I really resonate with a lot of the masculine do hard shit culture with the Jocko or the Goggins and a lot of these guys to a degree, because it's not going to be an easy journey for us men. It's just not. Mm-hmm. And I think if we try to think of it's all peace and love, it's all puppies and rainbows, it's not. It's fucking not. And you're going to face up against things in this life that are going to be very difficult, very triggering, and you're not going to know how to handle them. Yeah. And that's going to be, this is the spiritual path. So it's just like preparing our mind, strengthening our body, as much training, not necessarily like running 200 miles, but as much like training as you can do to just make yourself a stronger spirit and a stronger physical vessel, so that when those challenges come, you're ready.
Yeah, I feel you on that, and I'm glad we're touching on both, like the sides of the really letting go and surrendering, and then to this whole mindset. And I find myself, like, those tools for me are so essential to play in both of those areas. I'll go a month or two where I'm, really in my feminine, and I'm, playing music and singing and just flowing. And then I'll have a month where I'm just like, I call it Goggins mode. I'm just like waking up, running miles, like pushing myself as far as I can go. And both of those are such medicine. Mm-hmm. And I think it's important for all of us to experience it, and maybe not to, I really believe in balance, and maybe I'm projecting because, a lot of my path is around doing both of those, but I believe either can be overdone, and it's super important for men to experience both. If you haven't leaned into one of those areas, there's a lot of room, and it'll actually expand your capacity to work with the other side as well.
My vision of masculine feminine balance is like out there on the trails in Mother Nature with the trees and the forest and trail running and singing a song. So like singing a song while I'm running. So just like cruising along and just pretty much that being like life. Just like cruising along at a steady pace. And then a bear comes, you deal with it. And you gotta get back in the game, keep singing, or whatever. It's just like you gotta exert the effort. You gotta take the action. You can't just pray all the time. At least in my life, it's prayer plus action.
Yeah.
And then contemplation. Sitting with the awareness and the results of like, okay, I prayed for this. I did this. This is what happened. That's not what I wanted. So back to the drawing board. Let's do this again and get better at that whole process, right? So to me, that's what like visualization and direction and purpose and manifestation is all about. You have to be clear in your mind. So if you're unhealthy, you're not clear in your mind. If you're not clear in your gut, and if you're not clear in your gut, you're not clear in your mind. So there's all these factors that have to be addressed before you can really get clear on like who you are and where you're going. It's easier said than done. And I've gone in and out of like moments of extreme clarity and then, got back on some unhealthy foods and habits and fell off, and just not been clear, and then like get caught in these cycles and struggles and confusion of like, why can't I get back to that man that I'm meant to be? Why is there so much resistance? Well, there's some aspect of my life that's out of balance. There's something that I'm not really facing in myself right now. Maybe it's diet, not enough exercise. I think this is for a lot of men, right? It's just things get hard, and that's when the going gets tough, the tough get going. But it's you got to get going. you got to really make when the stakes are higher, you got to take those actions that are really going to benefit you, because you're just going to have, I think you're just going to have less and less opportunities as you get deeper into life. There's less and less opportunities to like make the same mistakes.
Yeah. And I think that ebb and flow of going through those periods where you might be going through a week where you're doing everything perfectly and feeling so aligned, and then things change a little bit. And I feel like it's inevitable, because as we change, there's always going to be, when we take that step forward, there's going to be equal and opposite resistance to that. And so it's like, almost when you feel that resistance and you're wanting to escape it, it's a sign that you're working through something. And, it's just a matter of, I believe one aspect of just getting better at noticing and, with coping mechanisms and how you're getting through that. But ultimately, I see it as like a necessary step. It's like a cycle gets completed, and then a new cycle of discomfort is going to start, and work through that, and just over and over again.
Yeah, and to go back to men's work. So, and lastly, just to clarify, I said there were less and less opportunities to make mistakes. Well, that's not necessarily true. There's always opportunities to make the same mistakes, right? There's infinite opportunities to make mistakes, right? That's the path of an entrepreneur, is like failing, and right, you have to fail a certain number of times. But I think there's less and less opportunity. There's less and less margin for error, so to speak. If you want a certain outcome and a certain goal, there's less and less margin for error.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I like that word better.
So the men's work journey for me began after I met my wife, and actually after I got married. And then I realized I had never really had a long-term relationship. I had been in love. I had said I love you to girlfriends. I hadn't had a girlfriend for more than 2 years in my whole life. And I didn't really know who I was. So when you say I love you to a person, you really need to know yourself. And I think for most of my life, I didn't. I didn't really know who I was. So it was really hard for me to be in relationship with myself and with other people. So it wasn't until I got married and made that commitment to my life partner that I realized I had a lot of work to do around myself and relationships. And sure, the plant medicine ceremonies showed me some things and assisted with that, but they weren't going to do the work for me. And a lot of that work had to be done in circle, had to be done amongst men around the fire, with Man Tribe and with the men's communities and groups that I was a part of. I had to learn a lot about myself, and I had to learn about myself in the reflection of other men, and in that vibe, in that feeling of community and circle that I hadn't had, that conscious community of men that I hadn't had in New York. So that when we moved to Venice Beach, my wife and I, and we were married, and we had our child, that was the journey that I was on, was working on myself and improving myself in a community of men that I was a part of.
That's really beautiful, man. And I really, my own journey and what I've felt is like there's nothing that motivates man to be better than falling in love. And I imagine having a child is that also, maybe times two, and
I think it's the responsibility of fatherhood. Because marriage, I mean, you see so many divorces now. Like, people get married, they get divorced. When you have a child, it changes that responsibility of marriage and also of being a parent.
yeah.
And also, we were just listening to a podcast recently, and they were talking about how men have been failed by society. And they specifically referenced when men get divorced, and men that have fathers get divorced, they lose half of their income or their assets, and they don't get to see their kids as much. So the women, basically, the wives, they get more of the income, and then they get more of the time with the children too. So there's something inherently difficult and questionable about the legal system and what's going on with men there. So when it comes to marriage and fatherhood, there is, you have a duty, and that duty really comes first. Obviously, and taking care of yourself is a must. So it just becomes like you not only have to take care of yourself, but you have to take care of these other people, your wife and your kid, and it's essential. So it just makes it a lot. Like when my son Phoenix was born, and I held him for the first time, it's this shift that happens where it's just not about you. It's just not really about you anymore, and it's like, keep your vessel healthy and keep your body, but it's not about you. Like, you're part of this, but you're part of this greater mission, and you're part of this family too, and your role is clear, and it's going to change somewhat. Things are going to change, and your role might shift, but that responsibility is clear. Like, you see this little guy, and you see yourself in him, and you just know, like, it's really, really, you see the purity of that soul and that baby, and you just know, like, you don't want to fuck it up.
Yeah.
It gives you such a deep purpose and such a deep meaning, and also a boost, like this dad boost, like superpower, so to speak.
Yeah.
Of, like, it's almost like I'll be in the gym with, like, guys who aren't dads, and I'll keep going because I'm a dad, and they'll get tired. Right? And it's like, there's something there. There's something there. It's like a legacy piece. It's like and you could not be a dad and have that too, but you got to have, like, a really strong reason for, like, your life.
Yeah.
And for me, it's like being a father. And there's other strong reasons I have for living and showing up, but that's definitely one of the greatest ones.
Yeah. I always I always wanted to wait, and I was never really excited for fatherhood. But in this last year, a fire was stoked in me. I was like, man, like I really would love to be a father, soon. I used to be like, oh, when I'm 40, but like,
There's never a right
yeah,
time.
yeah,
And when you're 40, it's going to be challenging, and if you had a kid now, it would be challenging.
yeah,
So it's almost like if you had a kid now, you'd be arguably more physically energetic or able, right? Uh, but then if you're 40, you could say you'd be more financially secure, possibly, right? It's hard to say, but I don't. It'll happen. If that's your intention, it'll happen just as it's meant to, and you'll get to say yes to that. And just open up that possibility for yourself.
yeah. And it's beautiful to hear the way that you talk about fatherhood, the way that you show up for your family, the way that you love for family. I could really feel it, and the fact that it makes me even like feel that I want to be a father. It's beautiful.
Do you have any pets?
And no, but my roommate now has a dog, and I'm getting a little bond with him. It feels good, and I grew up with dogs, so like like man.
So it's like a pet times 1,000.
Yeah. Yes. That's great.
Yeah. Yeah, kids need more attention than pets.
Yeah. And so you mentioned how, becoming a husband and a father inspired your journey in men's work to like be a better man. And I'm curious how the men's work translated to becoming a better father and husband. What did that give you? What did that do for you? What did that make you feel that led to growth and greater purpose?
Being amongst other fathers was one of the most beneficial things. So shout out to Kelly Gardner, shout out to Preston Smiles, all these guys that I've learned with and grown with over the years. Jetty Azuma, these guys were sort of lighthouses for me to grow myself and to just know that being a conscious dad can be done, and it can all be balanced. So there were definitely a lot of men in different groups and just support that I've received over the years that was just so powerful. And once I became a father, it was really, really helpful to get support and talk to other fathers, because it's just a different resonance. And obviously men's groups and support and connection with men that aren't fathers is super important too. I think something just shifts there. And like, since I've been doing men's work and been in different groups, I met so many guys that have like so many kids. I met a guy with like 7 kids, and then also these like larger families where you know the woman has kids. It's like the second marriage or something, and so the families get combined, and now there's like 7, 8 kids, and it's interesting. And I mean, I have one, and it just seems like, I don't know. There's something that happens when you have a lot of kids that I've witnessed, and they play with each other, and it kind of gets easier when you have a lot of them, and there becomes like a little community of its own. But
I've heard they learn to almost take care of each other in some ways. The older ones take care of the younger ones, and it must be. I would love to, be a fly on the wall and watch how that little community works.
But really, as a dad, I mean, it's been such a healing journey for me to just witness my son and to see his energy level and enthusiasm for life, and then to remind myself that I have that same joie de vivre. It's like love of life and just this inherent joy. And in Brazil, they say só alegria, which is just only joy, just this purity of vibration, where it's just optimistic and positive and just keep going, like infinite go. Just this beautiful, beautiful energy of watching my son. And he's just such a blessing to my wife and I. And, yeah, it's just such a powerful reason to show up and become better.
Yeah. Yeah. I've seen a lot of, I've seen you interact with your son. I've met your son, and I've seen you post some like playful videos with him. I find a big part of my journey, and as I talk with other men, is things get really, really serious at certain points, and tapping into that inner child and that playful side. It's important for us to get back in touch with that side. Have you always, kind of had a playful side, or have you witnessed, how maybe playing with your son has allowed you to dive deeper into that? I've talked to other fathers about this. I'm curious if you've noticed that.
It's a letting go that happens. It's playfulness, dancing. It's working with the energy too. Like my son likes certain movies, and we kind of got him off of the tablet, and have managed his relationship with technology. But every now and then, like I select movies that would be good to watch together. So like last night we watched like old movies too, like classics, like 101 Dalmatians was made in like 1960, and obviously like Disney has references and like innuendos and things like that, but it's like whatever, there's like a guy smoking a pipe, and it's like seeding the kids to smoke tobacco when they get older, but like I'm not worried about that.
Yeah.
I'll teach them how to smoke tobacco. But let's see, just this playfulness, right? So it's like it's playing with the energy, and like me becoming a kid again, and me activating my inner child to just play with my son. So it's this heart opening and this like really beautiful thing that happens, this medicine that happens when I'm just playing with my kid, and everything else has to just stop. And that's what happens. Everything else just stops, and I'm right there in the present moment with him, playing the little fish game with the magnets, or Hungry Hippo, or Jenga, or whatever the hell we're doing, painting, doing science experiment, volcanoes with baking soda. Like he is just so eager to learn, and it's just such a cool thing to be part of. So, and also he's going to a great school, Waldorf, and my wife and I are super proud of that we just moved to Texas, and we got him into that great school.
Mm-hmm.
So we're really grateful and blessed to be on this journey with our little man.
Yeah, that's beautiful, man. Yeah, I've
Yeah.
heard really, really good things about Waldorf. And
Yeah, we both didn't go to a school like that. My wife and I, she grew up in Brazil. I grew up in New York City. So we both went to public school, and now like to just get our son into this education where we believe in the model and we believe in the teachings on every level feels really good to us.
yeah, yeah, I have the same sort of concerns with the traditional school systems, and just parts of me that things I wish I learned, about the earth, about you know communicating with other people, emotional intelligence, being in harmony with the earth, and it's like those are the most important things I wish I learned. Maybe I'm missing out on some things, but
you didn't learn them, and now you really learn
yeah,
them.
yeah, yeah.
It's almost
Exactly.
like you had to learn the opposite in order to like really learn
Yeah, and appreciate it.
and appreciate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd love to change the tone a little bit to from the past to the now. And what are you working on now? I know you're a men's coach. What are you creating? What are you passionate about? What does that look like?
Sure. Well, being a men's coach and working in these communities, so we started this community man tribe. Being a leader in that way is definitely a part of who I am. And I'm at this really interesting part of my life where I'm like really deep diving into myself as an income producer, as a provider for my family, as a businessman, and then also who I am in community. So there's some things that I just do for free, and it's just like my gift. my gift to the world. And then there's other things that I do to make an income. So I've really, over the past 10 years, I've really like analyzed myself and also the world and what works and what people pay for and what people sort of expect. And, you know, maybe you're a licensed psychologist or psychiatrist and what people pay for that. But I mean, the paradigms are shifting, and obviously the coaching industry has exploded. So really just, you know, what am I working on? What am I doing? I'm creating experiences. I'm creating experiences and retreats and communities of men. And I'm also at the juncture of making offerings that are just going to be direct problem solving solutions. So I have a lot of solutions to a lot of problems that men have, whether it's diet, shamanic, sacred plants online is something that I started and my wife assists me with. It's a beautiful mission where we're educating people about cacao, tobacco, and coca, right? So those three sacred plants are indigenous medicines. And our society, to me, it's like the perfect juxtaposition of like, okay, these three plants are clearly medicines in the tribes and indigenous cultures, but then in American mainstream culture, they're poisons, right? You take something like cacao, you take out all the nutrients and do this Dutch alkalized process where basically all the minerals and the nutrients of the raw cacao become shot, and it just becomes just denutrified. And then you have coca, which is in like chocolate ice cream and Hershey's, and then they add milk and sugar to it, and then ends up being 51% sugar and poison. So people get addicted to that sugar, and then they're addicted to chocolate. But that's not the same chocolate as, you know, getting it from nature and getting it and preparing it sacredly and intentionally. So I think there's a lot of education there about cacao ceremony and how to open your heart with this medicine. It's not Valentine's Day candy. It's like going deeper with that. Tobacco is another medicine that is labeled as poison by our culture and society, and cancer. And you know, a lot of people are just smoking their emotions, negative emotions, into their body, and they are unaware of what they're doing. And tobacco is a master plant. It's a carrier of intention. It's a carrier of power. And people are stressed out and they're just using and abusing it to get a lift, to get a buzz, and to just get their brain back on track so they can work the job they hate some more. Or they're drunk and they want to get a lift, just like with cocaine, right? So cocaine is the last poison, which I believe is actually a poison of the spirit. I mean, it's pretty clearly is. I mean, just look at Wolf of Wall Street and what it does to, right, the infinite wanting and the infinite need that just never seems to end on cocaine, right? Where people are just so relentless that they're
Hungry ghost,
right? So they call it the white devil for that reason, right? But we got to understand how cocaine came to be. It was, this plant has been around for thousands and thousands of years and used by indigenous cultures of the Andes, Peru, and Colombia. And so mama coca, basically, not that long ago, maybe 200 years ago, something like that, there's 18 alkaloids in the coca plant. And one of them was isolated and deemed to be the strongest, like cocaine. And they basically did this process where, just like they did to the cacao, they isolated, or they took out a lot of the nutrients and a lot of the alkaloids that are super beneficial and superfoods, and they just got this active ingredient. And this is what a lot of the pharmaceutical companies are doing with plants from the Amazon and pretty much a lot of the pharmaceutical drugs, is they're taking away the spirit of the plant and they're just extracting this molecule, which is going to be effective. It's going to be strong, but you're missing the whole point. You're missing the whole wholeness and the whole beauty of the medicine. So these are the types of things we educate people about, and this is really our mission. And we have a lot of missions within that mission, and We've done this for the past 6 years, ever since we sort of heard the prophecy of those three plants, tobacco, cacao, and mama coca.
Hmm.
So just the education there is
Yeah.
very, very important. And then, yeah, just being a being a lighthouse and being a wealth of knowledge and experience that can introduce people to different ways of being and different ways of consuming or different ways of ritual. So instead of just waking up and needing coffee, to maybe shift into a ritual with their coffee or an honoring of their coffee, and then realizing maybe at some point that the coffee might not even be good for their body, and shifting over to cacao or matcha, and then recognizing the ancestral origins of those plants and then creating your own. So really for me, that's really what changed my life. It's this way of living and this way of communing with plants and animals and everything, but really in this case with like plant medicines and just everyday interactions with what we put in our body that becomes us.
Yeah, yeah, and it goes even as far as the food we eat, the salad, the meat, the fruit, it's all coming from the earth, and
Hmm.
it really extends out to everything.
Yeah, and this is why it's important that if you don't grow your own food, to know your farmer, and sacred hunting, right? To like all of these things seem like, I mean, to people living in cities, a lot of this might seem impossible, but I mean, I'm from a city and I just believe it's possible. And here I am in Texas, ready to go hunting and ready to learn, to learn these things, and just keeping an open mind. Like, yes, I want to learn the sacred truth of what it means to get your food. I want to learn what that connection is really about, what that reciprocity is really about. I've already learned a little bit. I know how to make offerings. I know how to give thanks. I know how to talk to spirits and talk to plants, and the same thing is done when you take an animal's life. You're talking to that animal, thank you for providing for my family. Thank you for giving me nourishment. I'm going to eat every part of of your vessel. I'm going to
Hmm.
eat every part of what you've given me. Thank you.
Hmm.
May this meat make me strong so I can continue to hunt.
Yeah. Hmm.
So so that's something that's a piece in my journey that I'm leaning into, is hunting and wanting to heal that part of me that's like has eaten meat for many years and then like not had that connection. So even to the point where I'm like eating less meat and just being more conscious of like where the meat I get comes from, and and really wanting that experience and
Yeah.
really wanting to introduce my son to that too.
Yeah, that must be a beautiful way to connect with your son in that way and
Mm-hmm.
teach him. And yeah, it makes me think too just how deep that relationship goes, as you talk about, how much more there is to learn and where you want to go, and the things you want to learn to integrate. It's like I see it as this infinite spectrum of the feeling of connection. And there's no like getting to a place of, oh, I learned this and
I'm
that's
done.
it. It's just like how deep do you want to go into it? You
Uh-huh.
could keep going and connecting deeper and deeper and finding more and more meaning and connection. And
I heard a perspective recently on another podcast, and it was this man, and he said that I only learn what's going to make me most effective and most useful. And to me, that sounded kind of sad because I couldn't really feel his joy and his love for life. And obviously, being efficient is part of the equation. We want to be efficient. We want to be effective as men. At the same time, if that's all that life is about, it can get very dry. And I didn't sing growing up. My father wasn't much of a singer, but I took it upon myself to sing more,
mhm,
and I enjoy it.
yeah,
So just really doing those things where like you enjoy just to sing. or just to go hiking in nature and just not with those things that have no expectation tied to them, where you just feel beautiful.
Yeah, even that word efficiency, it just like it almost makes me think of like you're reducing human down to a function, as if it's not a living, breathing human. It's like we're not here to just complete a function efficiently. We're here for so much more than that. The wide variety of experiences and feelings and emotions and connection we can experience. That's what I see. That's what I live for.
Well, for the structural things, right? Like the masculine is the structure and the container that supports the feminine, which is this beauty that we're talking about. So if we don't build the house or chop the wood, there's no fire. If we don't do those things efficiently, we're not going to get them done by the time, if we don't get the tent up before the storm comes. Like there's certain things that do need to be very efficient, right? But I think it's like, obviously, like we need to get those things done and then we can play.
Yeah.
So I think for a man, it's really important to understand that, and for an initiation to happen where it's like, yes, you can live a really beautiful life as a man, but you gotta put that work in and be efficient at those things that you're good at in order to serve your community. Because if then what are you doing otherwise? You're just like a child. And I think that's the main difference between a child and a man, is a child is provided for and can play and spill things and just mess. Child doesn't need to be efficient so much, but a man, I think, does. And once the needs are met, he can enjoy himself, kind of.
Yeah,
it's inevitable. I mean, but here's the real beauty. It's enjoying the process.
I was gonna say,
enjoying the chopping the wood, enjoying the building the house, enjoying the whole process of like your service.
Yeah,
that's where you gotta really, you can't think of it as like a burden. You gotta think of it as an awesome opportunity.
Yeah, and I think that's the gift that connection brings. When you really know your why and what you're doing it for, those things get to be enjoyable. The work gets to be enjoyable. The hard gets to be enjoyable.
Exactly. And then that's what we were talking about before. It's finding the joy in the discomfort, and then just realizing, like, if you're on mile 23 of a marathon, or you're doing this like really long, arduous, hard thing, to just go into this mode where you're just loving it anyway.
Yeah.
And like the ice bath. That's why the ice bath is such a big part of my life, because it's just training. It makes a few minutes in that ice bath make many hours of my life outside of that ice bath easier.
Yeah.
So it's just conditioning and training. Like I would absolutely make that trade any day of the week. A couple minutes for a couple hours of like more flow and less pain and just regular life.
Totally.
So
yeah, and I could totally relate with the ice bath. I've never had one before. I just got one about 20 days ago.
Oh, you have one here?
Cool. I'm 20 days in a row now with a cold plunge. It's like life changing.
Yeah, it really is a game changer.
Yeah, for sure. And yeah, I'd love to, just thank you for coming on and wrap up a little now. But before we wrap up, I would love for you just tell the people, where they could find you, what you're offering, anywhere. If you enjoyed this conversation, anywhere you'd like that to direct them to connect with you.
Sure. Well, I'm alexander.e.hill on IG, and then there's man.tribe on IG as well. And the Sacred Plants mission is sacredplants.online. So that's what we're up to. Those are the things we're doing here in Austin at the moment. And there's a couple new exciting things about to launch. So definitely make sure to get involved, and feel free to reach out to me, and I'll keep you updated with our list of events and offerings. And my wife and I have done over 100 events in the past 6 years, from Cali to Oregon to Arizona, and now we're in Texas. So just really, really grateful for all of these things that we've done all of these years. And we'll definitely be doing more cacao ceremonies in Austin. I know she's already got a whole bunch on the calendar, and I go and help out and support those. And I mean, I love cacao and I love sound healing and music and all these things. So just really creating those beautiful experiences to bring us all together. Just gonna a lot more of that.
Mm.
And
yeah, let me know when those cacao ceremonies start up.
Yeah,
I'd love to come through.
And then on the complete juxtaposition is sacred combat and going into these men's communities and just getting involved in the physical, and then beating each other up, and then going to sit in a cacao ceremony feels even better.
Yeah, right.
Right. It's all about the contrast.
Exactly.
And it's almost like when I first started on this journey, I was like, man, life has beaten me up so much. I just want to do sound healing and cacao sound baths and cacao and la 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 la. Right? Just chill. And I was neglecting that part of myself that's an athlete and that loves to do hard shit. Mm-hmm. Right. So I think it's just all about it's about doing both. It's really just the masculine and the feminine, and I think that's how we really learn about ourselves.
Yeah, totally agree, brother.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for coming on, man. It's been a pleasure, and any last words?
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. This is great, and grateful to know you and to witness your journey and to see you in Austin doing your thing. So, just really grateful for you as a friend, and thanks for doing this.
Yeah, thank you, man. I'm looking forward to continue deepen this brotherhood, man.
Awesome.
Yeah, much love, brother, and hope you guys enjoyed. Have a great day. Peace.